Question number one.
Question number one.
You've forgotten the questions.
Okay. How did your role at the Royal Court as a play reader and director lead you to teaching improvisation?
Well, they started a studio and they didn't have, they had very little money to pay the teachers because Princess Margaret had a cold and she cancelled the official opening of the Janetta Cochrane Theatre. And so it stood open for more than 2 years. Not open, it stood closed, but we could hire it very cheaply because she didn't have another space in her appointment book to open the Janetta Cochrane Theatre. So we benefited from her having a cold. So we had the space, but not the teachers. So the directors of the theatre had to teach at the studio. And that included me, and I had no training of any kind. So what am I going to teach? So I read a few books on acting, and then it occurred to me they probably read the same books. So I went in and said, I don't know anything about this, but I'd like to investigate storytelling, because that's clearly part of theatre. And so we made up stories to start with.
Just telling them or acting?
I think we started telling them, and then almost immediately, because they're actors, we started acting them. God, it's a long time ago, this. It's not quite, yeah, that's right. Then I was teaching masks at the studio.
But why did they just let you, this new guy, take classes? Did they need teachers? Did they like your vibe?
I was always full of ideas, because most people are not. So, I don't know. I was thinking that the other day, like, it is a bit bizarre that you know nothing about something, and you go into an organization and you're immediately part of it. It was weird. Anyway, I was making changes in the masks, and that upset Devine. And he was teaching comedy at the studio as well as masks. But he was teaching full masks, that's right. I was teaching the comic masks, the character masks, and changing things. So Devine got a little upset, and he decided that he should take the mask classes and I should watch. So I should learn how to do it. And I was shocked. I thought he was doing it quite wrong. I mean, he would let them put the mask on and just sort of wander about, posturing. And he could get some good effects sometimes, but it was pretty hit and miss. And then he found the students who were with me and with Bill were much better than his. So then he decided to give up. But meanwhile, I'd been giving his comedy classes, and my comedy classes were hysterical, and his were really tedious, because he wasn't gifted at teaching comedy. And for some reason I was. And it may have been because I was fanatical about the movies and silent cinema. This before you had videos, so you had to chase them into obscure parts of London and stuff. So I was a fan of Buster Keaton and Laurel and Hardy and those guys.
And you could see enough of that just bussing around London to small theatres who they were still playing it? Why were they playing them in the 50s?
Little art houses or the classic cinemas would show old films. And like once a year, the National Film Theatre would show Buster Keaton for 2 nights, 2 performances a night. Things like the Navigator, say, or something, the General or something. So I would see every performance. This is before theatre. I used to think, Johnstone, you're wasting your time here. I mean, why are you chasing all these Japanese films and silent comedy? And then 2 years later, I was teaching actors and teaching comedy. So the thing I thought that was wasting my time was very valuable. So I think the thing about pursuing your, what's the thing that guy said?
Your bliss.
But yeah, pursuing your bliss,
Yeah.
which I thought was a waste of time, was perfect. So I think that gave me some kind of qualifications that nobody else had. And then, because it was so funny, I was always afraid of being a self-admiration group. So how do you test it? You can't invite your friends in because your friends lie. And besides, their responses are not genuine. The only way to test it is to go in front of strangers. And I wasn't particularly scared about that because I knew the actors wouldn't be, because it was their profession to be in front of people. So I wrote to 6 colleges and said we'd give demonstrations of the new work at the Royal Court in training. Didn't mention comedy, of course. And the first time I went out, I talked for about 5 minutes. And all the class, every single student in the class came with me. So I had 26 students. That's not a good idea. But anyway, I turned to look at them and they were all pressed into the corner in a huddle, trying to get behind each other. They're terrified. And I realized I made a terrible mistake, that that actors, even if they're on the stage every night, are full of fear, which is true. In fact, often the fear gets so bad that they have to give up and take some other profession. Incredible stress going on the stage if you're badly trained.
And worse when it has that edge of improvised vaudeville
There shouldn't
comedy.
be any stress. It should be like, I don't know, Bill Cosby was famous for just going on and doing it and coming away again. And no difference. Some people function without fear. If you were a carpenter, or a waiter's even better, a waiter's on show. The first couple of times, or a few times, the first week as a waiter, you're sort of learning the job, really. But then if you got more and more scared as you got older as a waiter, if you were scared after 6 weeks, if you were still scared, we'd say you were in the wrong profession. There's something stupid about the training of actors that keeps the fear. So my job was to remove the fear. And we had to go into public after that, because I'd already committed myself to 6 performances. And almost immediately we were on the stage in theatres. And there was nothing like it. So it's totally empty. It's like water in the desert. So
there was a break in this like spontaneous comedy shows, and
well, there weren't any.
Yeah, there was nothing. No,
there were some comedians who were very playful, and you sort of understood. Well, there's the Crazy Gang. I think they were a group of working class guys who got famous.
Yeah, as
comedians, and if they didn't have any fear, that was a great advantage. But actors, the actors was. I should have known it. How are we doing? I started in the theatre by... Is this the first question, by the way?
Yeah.
I started in the theatre by watching everything, and I stood in the wings and I'd watch the actors get big and strong to walk out into the light. And I'd see them shake themselves loose when they came back into the dark. That's crazy.
Like shake off the tension of it.
They were full of tension. They were pretending not to be afraid. And that's really high stress, and it's a terrible mistake. So one advantage of putting improvisation into drama schools is there's some hope. It might take some... the drama training when I was young, back in the 60s, actually made people more frightened. It's trying to please the professors all the time. Mm-hmm. They mustn't make mistakes. They're trying to think what they're doing. You can't ruin everybody, but you can ruin quite a lot of people by pushing it onto the intellect.
So these first comedy shows, is it there or more in the writers' group that the improvisation exercises started to be playful and useful?
There was nothing in the improvisation group, in the writers' group.
Oh.
We improvised, but there was hardly anything in terms of games. People would try out scenes.
Okay.
Anne tried out a scene from the Knack where, I suppose it is a game. You insist that one object is something else to the annoyance of the other person. I could insist this microphone is actually a modern sculpture, not a microphone at all. Or they're insisting that the bed is a piano. to disconcert one of the characters. That could be an exercise. But we weren't thinking like that at all. We were thinking of trying out people's scenes. Or if they had a theory, if Edward Bond said a chair can function like an actor, the rule was that if you could act it on the stage, you weren't allowed to discuss it. So you say, Edward, go up on the stage and show us how a chair can function as an actor. So in a way, the writers' group was very creative. But it was acting out bits of people's scenes. That was not the same.
So who was the group that you helped to be more relaxed and spontaneous with the exercises? I mean,
Well, that was the group at the studio.
they were actors at the studio?
Yeah, they're all professional actors.
Uh-huh.
No, I didn't understand their fear until I accidentally took them out, convinced that I was afraid, but they wouldn't be. But they were so afraid. It's like trying to get musicians to do music sports, which I've always failed to do. But, they used to play music sports. Classical music has never recovered from the lack of improvisation in music. At one time, every musician was an improviser, and they would have competitions and things, Mozart or Beethoven against people. It's a funny letter by Louis Schlosser about somebody saying, you've got to come to see the improvisations tonight. This guy from Salzburg is here. We're going to show him what we Viennese musicians can do. And he says, no, sorry, I got a dinner appointment. And the next day he meets the guy. And he says, whatever you do, never accept a challenge from this little short arsehole called Beethoven. Oh, this little short, ugly man. There's nothing you can do as an improviser to beat this guy. But that's in the correspondence. I read those two letters from Louis Schlosser. Yeah, you can. They're the Viennese guys. They're the great improvisers, and Beethoven arrives. What a pity there weren't tape recorders in those days. What a shame. God. But anyway, it all died with Franz Liszt around about that time.
As soon as people started admiring the innovators and copying them.
They started admiring perfection and getting it right, and the play went out of it a lot. So I think musicians are horribly trained.
Well,
when I see bits, bits of music teaching on workshops and stuff, it's usually pretty high stress.
I just went to a workshop at the Canmore Improv Festival. Did you hear that was happening?
No.
Yeah. It's the second year they had an improv festival out in Canmore now.
There's somebody called Ali connected with that.
Yeah, she organized it with her parents. But they had a Showstopper there from London. Have you heard of them? They do West End improvised musicals. Like they're on the huge stages. Well, that's what I thought too, but they're good.
They were good.
Well, I did a workshop with them about improvising songs and improvising music. And it was all about the connection, nothing technical. Yeah. It was all about making people feel safe with each other and not being good.
Things have changed.
Yeah.
It's another world.
Yeah.
Well, the old world goes on beside the new one.
Yeah.
It's like the two worlds are still here.
But the really good people are good for a reason.
Yeah.
I think. And then they played Theatresports, like with other people and mixed teams.
Yeah.
And they were amazing and just total misbehaving little bastards. It was wonderful.
Good Theatresports is amazing.
Yeah.
But where do you get it? I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Ali got it.
She got one half. The first half was kind of crap, and the second half was blown out of the water with like them just taking the piss out of the judges all over the place and taking over the show, basically.
The British are good at that.
Yeah, exactly.
If you ask me about people do ask me, we better get on to more questions.
Yeah.
People do ask me about different cultures, and it's basically all the same, except the English are good at misbehavior.
And they do it kind of as a character making fun of themselves.
Yeah.
You know, it's not serious, and you can feel it.
Who's that actor? Is it Grant? Hugh Grant?
Yeah.
is very good at being self-effacing, I guess.
Yeah.
It's very hard to teach people to misbehave without being aggressive and wanting to screw up other people's work. I mean, it's not easy. But with the English are different, in my experience. Europeans all say that. They've got about the English sense of humour, being different.
Yeah, good. It's obvious to me.
And it is different, yeah. I don't know why it is. Corporal punishment in the public school, I don't know. I don't know what did it, but there's something.
They survived imperialism by, maybe they would have been totally rejected by other cultures unless they came down a little bit. And it's worked.
I don't know. Maybe sport. It still bugs me when athletes are running around saying, I'm wonderful. Because I grew up in England where you weren't supposed to do that.
Pounding their chest and everything after the goal.
Yeah. And sliding on their knees. Yeah. And, look, I'm the best. And it's Theatresports groups. Some of them were giving a special prize for the best improviser, not the most helpful one. I hated that.
Well, they need to learn from Wayne Gretzky, famous for the most assists.
Is that right?
Yeah, sure.
Oh.
That's his legacy. Okay, question number 2. About you teaching at RADA in the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
What was the main piece of advice you had for students then, and how would it differ today? Or would it?
I've got no idea. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I teach the same stuff. I just made it simpler and I teach less of it. I think that's what happens when you get older. I think basically it's always been the same. It is called play. They are players. We do have the word actor, somebody who acts, who does something.
Yeah.
I think those 2 words are rather good, better than Schauspieler. And I've always felt that if the actor does exactly the same thing every night, I don't mind that. But if something changes, I think they should change immediately. They should be adaptive. So they're not doing the same thing every night through tension. They're doing it because it's the correct route. But then if something changes, they're responsive to it. The example I've often given is from the Mousetrap, where somebody comes on the stage and screams at the carpet because there's supposed to be a body there. That night there wasn't a body. So she screams at the empty carpet because she comes on the stage to do a scream. Well, it's the Mousetrap. It had been going for 8 years then. And then she has to come forwards and stop this acting and become a human being and see that there's no body on the carpet. I guess as she reaches out to touch it, as she's done for 8 years. So if you want to talk about acting, I guess for me it's fine if they do the same thing every night, if they're in the state where they're not just a robot, but they're sensitive to everything around them. There's a movie where 3 actors come off, leaving the screen, an ancient movie, and they knock against the ironing board. But the one who catches the thing on the ironing board and puts it back on is Chaplin. The other guys wouldn't even notice. But Chaplin's noticing everything.
His reflexes were there.
He sees everything. In the early films, there are these cardboard actors, and there's this human thing. It's a bit like Trump. He's this terrible asshole, but he's like a human being. He's a thing, and everybody else, all those guys trying to be president, was trying to say the right things. So it's awful. There's this human being among all these cardboard characters. And it's a bit like early Chaplin films. Trump was a human being, damn it. A horrible human being.
Horrible human being, but he stands out and people respond to it.
He's human. He's free. And it's horrible they elected him. And he's doing terrible damage. And they might elect him again. There's that question too. I don't think I've changed. I just made it simpler. And I don't do as much. If I live long enough, I'll probably do absolutely nothing.
Do you let people fail more and not give them too many pat answers? Just let them figure it out for themselves?
No. I want them to be happy when they fail.
Yeah.
It's a sign they're learning something. But I will tell them what to do. Yeah, it's like teaching them not to block. That's a basic. There's nothing wrong with blocking if you're an expert. But when you're a beginner, you're going to block defensively. So you can teach them not to do that. You don't just let them find it out. Would you like some tea? Do you have coffee? Drink the tea. I mean, the person says, would you like some tea, and takes control. The other person is desperate to take the control back, so they say, do you have some coffee? Or they'll say, would you like a drink? We have beer, we have wine. I got some Chardonnay here. I'd have, and they go on and on and on and on.